All right, everyone, we are back with another episode of Bureaucracy. In this episode, I will be talking about the history of minimum wage and then also the effects of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I will be drinking a Chicago local beer, also known as Fist City. Did I choose this because it has the word fist in it? No, absolutely not. It's made by Revolution Brewing. Tastes like beer, but if like a beer and an orange made a beer. All right, so in honor of fist and fisting, we will be talking about my other favorite thing that starts with an F, and that is $15 minimum wage. Did I choose that beer to make this joke? No, of course not. I would never do such a thing, such as make a fisting joke to talk about the $15 minimum wage, ever. So the minimum wage was established in 1938. I was going, see, okay, when you drink this beer and you burp afterwards, it like comes up like much more fruity, like it's very enjoyable. Anyways, the minimum wage was established in 1938 under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So this was part of FDR's, all these legislations called the New Deal, which was basically created in the wake of the Great Depression in order to help get the economy stimulated. So the minimum wage was established in order to lift people out of poverty and then also get the economy moving, because then people had more money to buy things. And then the phrase fight for 15, which is kind of what we established with the $15 minimum wage, that came about in 2012 when about like 200 fast food workers staged a walkout in New York City fighting for $15 minimum wage. I think a lot of people don't really realize this, but the current federal minimum wage is $7.25, and it's been that way since 2009. If you were to work 40 hours a week, every week for 52 weeks a year, totals to $15,080, which is absolutely absurd. I don't understand how people think that that's a living wage. Like it's just like basically putting someone in poverty. It's like, hi, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing right, but also sucks to suck. You know, like that's fucked. Let's talk about all the effects of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. There's 17 million people who make below $15 an hour right now because it's, once again, federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. And so basically raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would give a pay raise to 17 million people. And then the people that make slightly above minimum wage at the current moment would, like that's something around 10 million people, would also then get a pay raise in order to keep it competitive. So that's 27 million people getting a pay raise in America just based off of one piece of legislation, which is insane. And this will bring 900,000 people out of poverty. Let's talk about the effects of the $15 minimum wage. 31% of Black people and 26% of Latinx people would get a raise. Because once again, because of socioeconomic and racial inequalities and oppression and all that fun American stuff, a lot of the workers that are like forced into minimum wage jobs, which are all wonderfully important and essential worker jobs. However, the low pay is primarily like it affects people of color the most. And then 1 in 4 of people that would benefit from this $15 minimum wage is a woman of color, and nearly 6 in 10 people would be women. In case you were wondering, Black and Latinx workers are paid 10 to 15% less than white workers of the same job and quality. This piece of legislation has such a drastic effect on women and people of color. The people that make like below the $15 an hour, what are most likely that make the federal minimum wage and or just make shit money, are substitute teachers, important, nursing assistants, important, home health aides, important, grocery store workers, important, food service workers, important. I guarantee you to go about in your just daily life and not find, or to not know someone, or to like not have a family member that is not directly impacted by one of those workers. And the fact that we paid them such literal shit is atrocious, if you ask me. No one asked me, but here I am. Oh, and this is when it also comes to essential workers. Some 4.3 million people that have been deemed essential workers in the coronavirus pandemic, literally people that put themselves online and like protect us and allow us to go about our daily life in a much safer way and still allow us to survive, make less than $10 an hour. We're kind of just like, hey man, thanks for risking your life. We really appreciate it. Go buy yourself the nice pack of gum. You can do it, you know? Like, it's absolutely fucking insane. And then another thing to know is that people who are on the lower income status, when they get pay raises, they tend to invest more in their communities. So truly, which is something that's really important, is circular investments, right? In your own community, which like helps lift everyone up and is like very important for like socioeconomics, like a success. So these are so many positives, so many positives. I only have 10 fingers, but if I had more, I would add more fingers too. Of course there's pushback because America can't, am I right? I just winked with both my eyes. We're gonna move past that. Anyways, the two main concerns about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is job losses and increase in prices. With the minimum wage increasing to $15 an hour, 1.4 million people would lose their jobs. So unemployment would increase by 1.4 million people, which comes to about 0.9% of the workforce. It has that effect, which is really unfortunate. But I also just implore you to remember that it makes the lives of 27 million people better. You do have to count for the 1.4 million that will be having a struggling time. However, half of those people will be teenagers, still live at home in multi-income families. So it wouldn't have as drastic as an effect as what the initial numbers might see. It wouldn't be politics if it didn't have like 24 layers. It's like a nice pastry, like a nice Greek pastry. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would increase the budget deficit by $54 billion over the next 10 years, which, once again, it's all about putting policies into perspective, because it's so easy to look at these numbers and be like, oh, that's terrible, but it's important to look at the grand scheme of things. You have to look at everything in context. So $54 billion, a lot of fucking money. But for reference, the current budget deficit of the United States is like $3 trillion with a T, trillion. For reference, there are 1,000 billions in 1 trillion. And I'm talking about 54 billion, right? So that doesn't even scratch a dent. If you get what I'm saying, is that 54 billion on paper, a lot of fucking money. But if you look in the context of the budget deficit in a total, it's not insane. And it's not like it's all at once. It's another good burp. Citrusy. I like it. It's over 10 years, right? So it's possible. And it's not something that's absolutely fucking insane, you know? So you may be asking, like, where does the budget deficit come from? Like, why is it so much money? A lot of the workers that are employed by Medicaid and Medicare make minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage, which is, once again, $7.25. I'm just gonna keep saying it until you realize how little money that is. So raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would increase the amount of money that the government is paying to these people that are subsidized or paid for by the government, which is why it would increase so drastically. Another big thing is there would also be an increase in unemployment spending, and that net would be about a 20% increase. There would be an effect on gross income for people above the poverty line, right? People above the poverty line would have a decrease in net income by 0.1% for people above the poverty line. However, people below the poverty line would have a 5.2% increase in their income. And I think that's what's very important to remember. And those with higher income quintiles are more likely to be affected. So once again, a person up here goes, "Doop," for people down here to go like, "Whew." So obviously there is a lot of back and forth, like an angry drunk couple on a night out, just going at it, out of nowhere. Anyways, I urge you to think about the positives of this. Of 6 out of 10 women would get a raise, would lift the wages of 27 million people. 900,000 people would be lifted out of poverty. People of below the poverty line would get an income increase of 5.2%. Would predominantly affect and raise the wages of people of color, especially women of color. So this is a necessary step in addressing racial and socioeconomic inequality. So that's all about the $15 minimum wage. And then in the next episode, I will talk about the current legislation going on surrounding the $15 minimum wage. Cheers.